Well, nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Youri. I'm one of the founders of Predico. It's an inventory management software for Shopify brands, and we help them make better forecasts, better predictions, and then turn that into better, POs, placing POs on time to avoid stockouts and excess inventory. And what I'm going to talk about today is, cash is king. It's like efficient ways to optimize your inventory operations. And I just want to say that, brands traditionally spend most of their time at the beginning, especially optimizing their storefront and, marketing campaigns to maximize sales and revenue. But since COVID hit and that supply chains, got massively impacted, many of you have started paying more and more attention to what's going on in the back office. And there's a lot of money actually that we're leaving on the table every year from running suboptimal operations. So what I'm going to try and do today is to share some practical tips on how you can take advantage, that hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of, and in order to run these leaner and more profitable operations. I'm going to start by the beginning. First things first, setting up a strong relationship with your suppliers. Your products, the ones that you're selling to your customers, they start by with suppliers. So this is where I want to start today. Oh, and by the way, guys, if anybody has a question or anything like that, I don't see you at the moment. So if you want, let's make this as informal as possible. Feel free to interrupt me, raise your hand, ask a question, and we can go through that. If it gets a little bit long, then we can obviously, we've got some time for Q&A. But let's make this relaxed and avoid the monologue if we can. First things first. Very likely that whenever you're an up-and-coming company, you're looking for a supplier and you found one, it's very likely that your supplier is working with enterprise customers, and they will always be your supplier's favorite. They're bigger brands, they're more financially, they're just better customer overall. So the best way that we found, to get your suppliers fully on board and stick with you through tough times is actually to sell your vision and make sure that they understand that they're part of that vision. One thing that is key as a part of that is to go and pay a visit to your suppliers. Selling your vision, helping them understand what you're trying to build is something that you can do on a phone, on a Zoom call like we're doing today. But if you manage to go, in Asia, in Mexico, or somewhere else, wherever you're producing, even if in Europe or whatever, try and go visit your suppliers and do that face to face, because it always has a much bigger impact than if you do that digitally. And again, these guys make or break your business with the quality of your product. So make sure you pay them a visit and sell your vision. Number two, I just told you to sell them the dream, but at the same time, you don't want to make promises you can't keep. So on the flip side of that, you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, because you need to understand that every time you're trying to convince a supplier to lock some capacity for you, they're rejecting another opportunity with another customer. So you want to make sure that you're building confidence with your supplier, and that you're giving them visibility on your expected growth for the next 6 to 12 months, and sharing with them something that is realistic, that you're going to hit, and make sure that on the back of that, you're locking the right level of capacity. Because if you're not doing that and you're just promising the dream, then obviously they're locking this huge amount of capacity for you, and then you only do a portion of this, and then next time around you're coming and you want to do that again, it just won't cut it, right? So under promise and over delivering, especially the first times, is super important. Number 3 here, and this one is often overlooked, but you should see.
Hey, I am calling because one sec. Let me switch you from speaker to.
Hello?
Sorry.
Okay. Do you have a question, or should I carry on?
Please carry on.
All right. So negotiation, every order is an opportunity to negotiate. So every time you're giving business to your suppliers, you should be thinking about what you're looking to optimize. you're an up-and-coming company, you should choose your metric, whether it's, your unit cost, your production time, your payment terms. You should be thinking, you may even be upfront with your suppliers to tell them, like, every time I'm going to give you business, I'd like something in return. And being able to just, every time you give them business, negotiate on a specific metric is going to be important for you to be able to, try to squeeze more out of your operations, whatever that metric is. Try to think about that, try to apply it, and you'll see, oftentimes a lot of people just don't ask and are afraid. There's no need to be afraid of anything. You should be asking. It's normal. Partnership, this one is kind of a double-edged sword. If your suppliers are core to the success of your business, or at least a few products, you might want to consider partnering with them. So, let's say you're a health and wellness company and working on this product that is kind of like revolutionary. It's a very specific formula, kind of unique. You don't have the cash to do the R&D because this can take, months, if not years. You might want to snag a partnership with your supplier that you might be better off like that, because they might waive, the R&D fee or just cut it very low. And this is good if you can get an advantageous deal financially. And if you play your cards well, but this could also be bad, and you've got to be able to understand that, you got to nail the terms with your suppliers, because the last thing you want is finding yourself locked with one supplier only until, as long as the partnership contract says. So you've got to be careful, assess all scenarios, but this is one of the things that you can also do to make sure that you're getting the best deals and making sure that you're cutting your expenses. And last but not least, at least on the supplier side of thing, we found with Annabelle this particular thread. I think it was on the limited supply channel. Steph was sharing that she had a much better than expected January with a new brand, and she found herself out of stock. And because it was Chinese New Year, well, she couldn't actually get stock in her warehouse for another 2 months. So she found herself with 2 months worth of out of stock. So can you imagine the opportunity here in terms of revenue, just because she was relying on just one single supplier that's now, closed because of Chinese New Year. So my point here is diversifying your supplier network is huge in terms of like de-risking yourselves and de-risking your inventory operation. So, remember COVID, lots of brands found themselves in a situation where literally they had no suppliers after the factories in Asia closed for 6 months straight. So finding yourself an alternative supplier is really key to run your successful operation. And when you're looking for one, I'd say one thing that you should be optimizing for is, the location, making sure that this supplier is close to where your customers are. So if you're selling mostly in the US, maybe good to find yourself a supplier in Mexico. If you're in Europe, maybe in Portugal might do it. Reason being, if supplier number one can't do it and can't do it like fast enough, maybe you're not going to get, as cheap of a production as your initial supplier, but at least, you're better off selling products than being out of stock for a couple of months. So diversifying your supply chain here is really key. Any questions on that part? I'm about to switch to another topic, so I just want to make sure we're covered here, or we can leave them for later if you want. All right. So we're now in good position with our suppliers, good terms, good diversification. We signed a partnership. Now it's time to focus on being properly stocked up. And I know it's kind of easier said than done, but hopefully we'll go through a few practical ways of doing so. So just to understand the scale of the problem that we're facing here, every year we're leaving more than $1 trillion on the table because of bad planning. Most of us.
This thing is all about.
Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry, my mic was on.
Okay. So every year we're leaving money on the table because we're running our operations mostly manually, and we're more reactive than proactive. So at the beginning, when you're running a brand for the first, like when you're starting off, this is fun. You can run things on spreadsheets. You can do things manually because you're not really sure what works and what doesn't. But at some point, as the business starts to take off, this inevitably leads to a couple of things. The first one is stockouts. It means that you're missing out on revenue. You have unhappy customers as a result of that going to the competition, and this is not good for the business. And on the other side, you have excess inventory, which means that you have extra costs, the COGS, the storage fees, and so forth. And at some point, you need to run promotions, sales that will potentially even impact your brand because you're selling at a cost or even a fraction of the cost that you bought this product for. So let's go through, how we can actually build an accurate supply plan, which is, it's key for the business, making sure that you have an accurate. Yeah. I guess Mike again, no worries. So number one thing that you need to focus on is building an accurate supply plan, leveraging historical sales, upcoming events, supply chain information, the whole shebang. But one thing that I want to insist on is it's very likely if you're a brand or if you're working with brands that your customers' inventory planning sheet looks like this. They're exporting data, historical data from Shopify on one hand, they're asking their 3PL for inventory reconciliation data on the other, importing everything into a sheet and then making, kind of like guesstimates around like what the sales are going to be in the next 6 months. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the logic here isn't bad. It's actually the right way of doing it. But the whole process, as it repeats itself, is super time consuming. It's very much painful because by the end of the exercise, your data is probably not even up to date anymore. And it's quite prone to error because your supply chain is based on assumption, your supply plan, is based on assumptions most of the time. So to build a coherent, accurate supply plan, the first thing you need to build is understanding what your demand is going to look like, right? Where is the demand going to come from for each other product? And some practical ways to do that is to turn this massive Excel spreadsheet into something that's visually helpful, like build a bar chart to see the demand distribution of your product over time, historically, to get a sense of the seasonality, the different trends that you see in the demand for your product. And the graph really helps paint the picture of where you've got peaks and troughs and where you've got to be careful and you've got to be properly stocked up. Now that you actually see these things, right? Historical demand, you can see the graph. It helps you understand what the seasonality and the growth trends for your products are. And based on the growth objectives that you have, which you can apply on top of this historical demand, that helps you understand where the business is going over the next few months and where these products are going to, like how much these products are going to generate in terms of sales. These remain assumptions, but at least they're backed by your historical data, which is key in order to, instead of just, backing yourself up from like, how did I do over the past 30 days versus, and using that as a catalyzer for what you're going to do for the next 30. One thing that's important on top of that is to revisit your plan monthly. You can't just create a plan, make a target, and think you're going to hit it, and then not make any, edits to the plan as you go forward. Like you have things that are happening in the business, things that are happening that you haven't really planned for. And so you want every month to be revisiting the plan and make sure that the assumptions you made last month remain true, or if you need to make any other assumptions or any new computations, that you're revisiting those for the foreseeable future, because this will have a massive impact, a knock-on effect on the inventory that you need to buy. Now, to turn this demand plan into a supply plan, there's 3 practical steps that you need to take. The first thing you need to understand is how much stock do you have on hand and what's in transit. And what's in transit is super key because you can't just, look at what you have on hand and just assuming that this is the truth. You've got products that are incoming from existing orders, and these are important, products to take into account into your supply plan. The second thing that you need to lay on top of that is the upcoming demand for each of those SKUs. We just worked it out, the demand plan that we have at the top. We now define how many days of stock we have left based on what I have on hand plus in transit and what the demand for my product is going forward. And that helps us understand, literally visually, what is the stock health of my product at the present moment? How am I doing? Am I at risk? Am I actually pretty healthy? Am I in excess? And then you can also just understand how this is going to evolve over time up until you're going to be in a tricky situation with your stock. And this is when you're going to have to make sure that you're triggering an order. And the way to do that is number 3, making sure that you have clear understanding and clear visibility of what your lead time is for each of those products, and understand how much stock coverage you want to have per product when you receive an inbound shipment. The lead time helps you be proactive and understand ahead of time when you need to place an order, rather than finding yourself in a tricky situation where you'll be out of stock by the time the order arrives. And the stock coverage helps you understand how many days of stock you want to have when the products arrive. Because one thing that we want to do is to avoid out of stock, but the last thing we want is to just stock ourselves up for the next year, because that's also going to lead to cash flow issues, right? So these are very, very much key. And all of this could be looking in, could look into something like this, where visually speaking, from left to right, you can read the data and you can understand, okay, here's what I have on hand, here's what I have in transit, here's what's the demand for my product, here's how many days I've got left, and then understand what is the supply plan that you need to put together, i.e. what are the orders that you need to place for these products. Now, when it comes to placing an order, something that I see is a lot of brands blindly order stock for products that they think work. But when we look under the hood, we realize that these products sometimes don't generate as much revenue as they thought, or maybe the product that they were initially thinking about buying to suppliers have lower gross margin than other products that sell just as well, but with higher gross margin. So one thing that is key as well when you're placing your orders, and to avoid stockouts and just squeezing again more out of your inventory operations, is to ask yourself, what are the metrics that you're trying to optimize for? Is it gross profit? Is it just restocking on bestsellers because you want to maximize the momentum? Is it putting an order for the products that are leading the highest average order value? All of these are metrics that you can get either from Shopify or from a system like Predico. And ultimately, that helps you understand what you're optimizing for and making the best possible buying decisions. So I would highly recommend doing this exercise, figuring out what you're optimizing for in order to place your next order, and see what happens on the back of that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kate. Hi, how are you?
This method that I just described is something that we've been doing over and over and over again over the past 2 years with Predico, with our customers, and we're seeing amazing results. This is actually a case study that we just posted this week with health.com. Let me tell you just very quickly the backstory. This is a 2-year-old brand making 8 digits, growing insanely fast. And the problem is that this growth is causing them troubles on things that we now understand. It's like inventory forecasts are becoming inaccurate. This leads to out of stock and also overstocking, causing trouble in the inventory operations. We set them up on Predico in a day. We personalized the buying table that I was showing you just earlier and helped them understand like what they are optimizing for when they're buying their products to their suppliers and when they're making their POs. And 2 months later, we get this message from Billy that their out-of-stock ratio has gone from 4% to 1% since they've partially switched over as they were testing the platform. We're talking 75x ROI, $500,000 in annualized revenue. This is a big brand, but these are the sort of results that you can get and the amount of money that you can actually accrue over time as you're building linear operations like that, and you're going through a very data-driven approach. Now, you're going to ask me, like, is this a magic one? Is this working 100%? And the answer is no, right? I would be lying if this was working 100%, because you never know what tomorrow is made out of. You can predict to a certain level of accuracy, but you're always going to get a little bit of it wrong. So what happens when you're actually out of stock? How can you actually make sure to try and still, make money out of that and turn potential revenue loss into profit? And one thing that we've seen working really well is a pre-sale strategy that I'm going to show you right now. This pre-sale strategy is coming from Haven Athletic. These are friends of ours. And these guys have created something super cool. As you can see on the PDP, they clearly state that they're running a pre-sale on a product that's out of stock. It's a pre-order, and they're telling you when the next batch is going to be available. They're actually doing it in such a way that incentivizes you to place the order because you don't want to be too late and be in the July section. And the way they're doing this, on the back of that, is they're setting up an email automation for the pre-sale follow-ups to keep the customer engaged and letting them know that they've, bought a product that's in pre-sale, that shipping time is going to take longer than usual. And then they label all of the orders within their Shopify with pre-sale for efficient tracking. So this way they can make sure to promptly dispatch when the stock is being replenished and be as efficient as possible, but still turn these potential losses when they were out of stock into profit because they've placed a PO for it. It's just not there yet. Right. Again, avoiding out of stock, probably easier said than done. Although now, if we are improving our supply planning, we should reduce out of stock as well as overstock. But that said, there are very practical strategies to get rid of stock of overstock without impacting your brand image. So let's go through that. I mean, number one is to test the demand before even launching a product. And there is a very practical way of doing so. I mean, create a product page for your test products, generate some images about the product even before manufacturing it, right? It's an idea. You want to see if it could work. You've got a good description about it. You create your PDP, you have a good image that you're generating, and then you're creating the description of the product itself. You can run ads on those on this particular product. So you've got landing page redirecting to this particular product, and then analyze the conversion, see who actually converts versus who doesn't. And this helps you not only just assess the potential for a product that you haven't even launched yet, but it helps you understand the potential ROAS and also helps you understand who your customers are, right? So, this gets interesting because then you can even better target when you've got the product, assuming you want to launch it, then you know exactly who you should be targeting more of rather than just, creating more general ads. Now, assuming you are overstocking yourself and you've got excess inventory, there are a couple of other things that we could do. First one, something that works very, very well is what we call a mystery box. It's a surprise subscription to sell off your excess inventory. And so you can see that, some brands like this one, Mr. Box, is leveraging personalized subscription to sell off their excess inventory. They're asking customers to fill out a form, specify frequency of ordering, the sizes, their preferences and things like that. And then customers get a new product every month or at the frequency that they chose, which matches their description. And as a result of that, what you are doing on the back of it, on the back office, is, selling off those excess inventory. So on the one hand, it helps surprise your customers with something new. And on the other hand, you are basically liquidating your excess inventory in a way that isn't impacting your brand and is actually delighting your customers on the back of that. Another way to do it, and this is our friends at Skio, we're doing something super nice called Surprise and Delight. So this is if you're running subscriptions again, but you can create a gifting experience for your loyal subscribers. So effectively, you're applying a discount or you're offering a free gift after a certain amount of orders coming from a customer. And these products that are in excess are cleared in a way that makes your customer happy. And for you, it just helps you run linear operations again. The last one, some things that we see popping up more and more. There are some really cool destocking platforms that helps you run these private sales. There's one in Europe called the Bradery, one in the US, called 260 Sample Sale. What these brands are effectively doing, I'm just going to press play here, is they're, helping you, they're collaborating with you to create private sales. They connect to your Shopify and only sell a selection of products with all your excess inventory, which are your products, you having excess inventory for. And they collaborate with you to basically create a promotional flash sale on their social media. They've got several hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and things like that. And they help you run these flash sales at a fraction of the cost of what it would cost you, and also without even impacting your brand. So they do all of the heavy lifting for you in order for you to just sit back and relax. But again, try to liquidate the excess inventory you have in your stock. So TLDR, we've talked about several things. There's a lot in there, and I'm going to share the presentation with you. But setting up a strong supply network and working on your relations every time you're coming back to them and giving the business is something that is key for you to be able to squeeze margins, land better payment terms, better shipping times, and things like that. Continuously refining your supply plan until you reach a stage where you're happy with its accuracy, and placing your POs based on the metrics that matters to you, based on the data and not specifically intuitions, is also key to make sure that you're improving on the accuracy of your plan, and as a result of that, reduce stockouts and excess inventory, and making sure to test the demand for a product before launching, and then establishing clear strategies on how to liquidate overstock is something that you can work on relatively easily and put together and even test relatively easily to try and run leaner operations again. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second. Just want to make sure to see if anybody has any particular questions.
Sorry, I may have missed this, but do you think there's a set percentage of inventory to revenue that you should have on hand? Like 20%, 30%, 50%? And should it be based on the cost of the inventory, or should it be based on the retail price?
Yeah. I'm sorry, 1 sec. Very good question. So the way I like to think about this is actually slightly different, although very much related to the question you just asked, which is that inventory, depending on one company to another, can be one of the largest expenses. Oftentimes is, right? It can be 20 to 60% of your working capital, and so depending on that, this is where you want to make sure of that you're looking at the margins as well that you can get from selling your product, and that will help you determine how much inventory you can actually afford. Now, when it comes to how much inventory you should really hold, the way we like to see things, at least in the way it's set up in a system like Predico, is thinking about, what would you feel is the right number of days that you should hold at any point in time, and what you would consider the lowest inventory you can get, like that's your safety stock, versus what's the maximum stock cover that you can afford. And only when looking into the data, you can really answer that question. But usually that determines, one, your frequency of purchasing, and two, the level of risk that you're willing to take on specific products like best sellers versus low sellers. And this is what we are looking in platforms like Predico to optimize, so that we're enabling our customers to take a little bit more, to be more cautious and stock a little bit more on the best sellers, because you really don't want to run out of stock, versus the low sellers when you're happy to take a little bit more risk, and therefore decreasing the safety stock in days, as much as you can, because you're not that much impacted if you're missing out on the revenue itself.
Okay, that makes sense. And one other question, sorry. In Predico, does it take into consideration shipping costs or freight costs and all of those items that sort of impact margin?
Yeah, exactly. So you have, the unit cost that we're taking, for example, from a platform like Shopify, that would be, the initial source of truth. You can override that unit cost if you want to, or have specific unit costs set at a supplier level. But then on top of that, you add all of the extra costs, which again, can be customized by the users. Could be shipping, could be tax, credit card fees, you name it, there's plenty. But we're adding those proportionally to all of the, products that we have in a PO, and the quantities of like the number of units we're ordering for each of those products, so that we can compute the landed cost of each of the products. So that's the unit cost plus all of the other costs that are averaged out across the purchase order.
Perfect. All right, thanks.
No worries.
I have a question on inventory management in reference to software. Do you use any sort of specific software to handle your inventory management? I mean, I've been using Shopify, but it's so limited. I need something a little bit more robust, but I don't know where to find or where to look.
Yeah. Can I ask, like, if you were to say, the number one or two, things you're trying to solve, like what is the problem you're trying to solve? But that will help me point you out towards one direction or another.
Sure. So we have probably about, I'd say, 500 SKUs that we work with. So it's a lot of inventory, and it's just been, so far as we're getting busier, it's been harder and harder to keep track of things. So I'm just looking for an easier way. Yeah, and my vendors haven't been helpful either, unfortunately. So I'm trying to just sort of solve that for ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. Very clear. I mean, I'm obviously very biased being the founder of a software that does that, but this is something that we really do well, kind of our bread and butter. So Predico is one of the options, especially when Shopify gets to a certain limit and people are not really keen on the Shopify, analytics and the reports that Shopify throws. And also you have a limit that you're reaching out, if we're going back to what I was showing you here on your Excel spreadsheets, you've got 500 SKUs, the business is growing, it's starting to become very time consuming and prone to error to just manage everything manually on this. So in Predico, this is effectively, an inventory management system that plugs into your Shopify. We are, in real time updating your, stock values, sales velocity, your predictions for, the foreseeable future. And that helps you paint the picture and understand, what is your supply plan, what is your buying plan that you need to have for all of these SKUs. So, again, very biased, but this is something that we're doing quite well.
Perfect. Thank you.
No worries. Any other question, team?
Yeah, I have a question as far as strategy goes, specifically for brands. I know the whole goal here is to mitigate days where it's out of and you're losing sales and you're experiencing the negative revenue loss of stockouts. But we were having a call with our Triple Whale strategy advisor, and they were saying that, like, as far as apparel brands go, sometimes the bread and butter is in selling out of a product really quick, so that you're creating momentum for customers to be like, oh my gosh, like I need to buy now before it sells out. So that they're signing up for the wait list, so that you're building, kind of like that scarcity push. So could you speak to, like, I guess, how your inventory management strategy might change across different D2C verticals?
Yeah, I mean, so I know that Triple Whale, you said Triple Whale, right? Is what you're using right now, and specifically, I guess, focusing on the e-commerce analytics and also the marketing, right?
Yeah, it was like a comprehensive marketing assessment.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I would potentially disagree with that. It just depends on, what your business strategy is. You've got amazing companies doing businesses just based off drops, right? You have a great example that's having a huge momentum right now it's a UK-based company called Represent. And this company is working on drops. Every week, they're dropping at the same time, the same day they're dropping new products. And, they've built a huge community, a huge, series of followers that are like, just waiting for that drop to happen to be able to click on, the sale and actually get access to the products. And I think this is one of the ways of working, but then obviously predicting becomes very much different, because ultimately, you don't have you have zero data for a product that doesn't exist. So, this is maybe for another topic, but like, how do you go about that? You look at specific products that do exist in your inventory that are like core products that looks relatively similar to the product you're about to launch, and then use that historical data to make the forecast for that new product. There are ways to do it, but this is like a whole new strategy in itself. And this just depends on how you want to create demand for your company. I would say that most of the companies don't run business like that, right? Like you basically have a core collection, you're doing drops every now and then, especially as a apparel and fashion companies. But I would say for the way we like to distinguish things is we are working with CPG and subscription brands, and they have a much lower inventory catalog. They have maybe a few dozens, if not hundreds of SKUs, but no more than that. And their inventory related issues come a little bit later than apparel and fashion and lifestyle companies, because they've got this subscription that is helping them understand when the demand is going to come from, at what pace. But for them to, when they're running out of stock, it's so detrimental to the business because it leads to an incredible amount of churn. They need to just avoid inventory stock out at all costs. So around like the $2, $3, $4, $5 million mark, they need a system like Predico or something else to be able to help them avoid being out of stock and just stay on top of that. When we're talking to lifestyle brands, so apparel and fashion, jewelry, cosmetics brand, and I forgot the name of the person who asked a question before, you have 500 SKUs, sometimes thousands of SKUs. We're working with companies that have tens of thousands of SKUs. What you want to make sure of when you have a catalog like that is just to stay on top of your inventory and have the right level of notifications and visibility on what's going on at the product level. And it's very difficult for you to be able to just skim through these if you're on an Excel spreadsheet manually crunching the data, because you have thousands of SKUs. It takes hours to do. So you need to have a system that automatically fetches the data and summarizes this thing for you, which is what a system like Predico does. And you've got others on the market depending on the size of the company that you are. But I would say, there is obviously different approaches on how you manage inventory, how you plan, how you order based on, the type of brand that you are. To your question about drops, this is just one way of running brands, and it's not like a good or a bad way, but it depends on whether you want to create that sort of demand and you follow that particular business model or not. But just doing that for the sake of like running out of stock and creating excitement might work for a brand, might not work for another. I don't know if this answers your question, but that's just my take on it, to be fully transparent.
Sure. And to add to your other thing of predictive analytics for bringing in new products, as a customer of Predico, does Predico have anything in the pipeline to help perhaps, analyze current best-selling products by keywords or attributes and then compile that into a report to say like, hey, you're selling really good through things that say distressed, or, you're selling really well through this length, you know what I mean? Like some sort of like historic and then predictive analytics, like, hey, bring in more of this.
Yeah, 100%. So, some R&D that we've worked on is to be able to do exactly what I was just describing before. So, you're about to launch this new product. You don't know how many units you need to order to your suppliers, or you don't even you want to work on a new product, but you don't really know what to actually, which one to start with. Then you can easily crunch some reports, and I can go into more details maybe offline on how we're doing that and how you can clearly see which products work better than others and are worth maybe, investing into an alternative to that product. But then assuming you've made the decision to create a new product and you want to know what the first order should look like, we're currently referring ourselves to the historical data of all of the products within the same category that the new product you're about to launch. And then, aggregating that and assigning it to that particular new product you're about to launch to give you a first estimate of what the launch could look like and therefore how many units you will need to reorder. Now, we have found that there are other companies that are running things a little bit differently, which is that every year they're running, they're launching a new version of an existing product. So, the best example would be an iPhone. This is the iPhone 15. The next one is going to be 16. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. You just want to assign the historical data of the 15 to the 16, which is the new one that's about to come out, and apply a specific growth factor because that's, what you have in mind for the revenue targets. And this is one of the things that we're also working on right now to be able to give this, strategy within Predico to our customers that have such a business model. Any other questions? All right, I'll take that as a no. We're good. First of all, just want to say thank you everyone for coming. You know, I always like to say that the business we're in is not a sexy business. It's kind of a boring business because, you know, who loves operations, who loves inventory, and probably not many people. But it's so core to the success of your brand that, you know, you need to be on top of this. So the fact that you're here means that you care and that you've been maybe experiencing these types of, you know, issues and that you want to solve that, which is great. That's, you know, the first step towards solving the problem is recognizing there is one. And then, you know, if you have any particular questions going forward, feel free to hit me up. We are on the limited supply channel. Happy to take a call if necessary and show you any sort of strategies that can help you guys with running your brands.